Imagine an entire army relying on a final group of men to turn the tide of a battle. These are the Triarii, and believe me, you've never heard anything like it about them. They were the living wall that rose when all seemed lost, the Iron Hand. That showed the true face of Roman power. Imagine the atmosphere of a battlefield filled with screams, shattered shields, and spears falling around. Amid this chaos, the figure of the Triarii emerged, the veteran warriors who kept the Republic, standing in its darkest moments. Since their first appearance in the Roman armies, these men exuded authority and experience. With every step, one could feel their unwavering confidence forged by countless fights and exhaustively rigorous training. They reflected the very essence of what it meant to be a Roman soldier: discipline, courage, and the certainty that the honor of the eternal city was worth any sacrifice. The true pain lay in the crucial dependence that Rome had on these elite defenders. When the first two lines failed, all hope rested on the Triarii. This reliance made many wonder how they bore such responsibility without crumbling under the pressure. However, the resolve and strength that sustained these veterans went far beyond the mere weight of their armor and spears, and this is the story you are about to fully unravel. The Triarii emerged as a pillar of security within the legions of the Roman Republic, representing the last bastion of defense amidst the fiercest battles. In times of Roman warfare, no one was more feared by enemies than these veterans who stood in the third line of combat. They were experienced soldiers, often bearing on their faces the marks of various confrontations and campaigns. It wasn't just about physical strength. It was also about mental resilience. Each Triarius carried in his personal history proof that overcoming one's own fears was the best weapon against imminent collapse. They stood in formation, holding back until the critical moment, calmly observing and analyzing the evolution of the clash. While the Hastati and Principes charged the front lines, the Triarii watched every movement, ready to intervene at the exact moment. It was this caution combined with skill that earned them their almost mythical reputation. Due to their status as veterans, there was a certain solemnity in their demeanor. Few dared to question a Triarius's decisions, as any suggestion from these warriors carried the authority born from blood and sweat in previous battles. Thus, their presence alone bolstered the morale of the entire troop. The Latin expression res ad Triarios rediit, which translates to the moment when the situation is handed over to the Triarii, signifies the turning point of a battle or the severity of a conflict. When this phrase was uttered, it meant that the fight had reached a decisive level. This confirmed the invaluable importance of these men. Beyond their historic weight, the figure of the Triarii also stirred admiration in Rome's popular imagination. Tales of almost superhuman courage circulated, inspiring youth to dream of one day holding that position. However, achieving such a place meant enduring a grueling journey, accumulating scars that went beyond the physical. This prestige deeply marked Roman military culture. But to understand how this elite formed and what motivated the emergence of this select group, one must look at the foundation from which they came, connecting the emergence of the Triarii to the early structures of the Roman legions. The roots of the Triarii date back to a period before the established legions, when Rome sought inspiration from the Greek phalanx inherited from the Etruscans. This primitive formation, though effective in some scenarios, quickly proved too rigid for the diverse enemies that Roman troops would face. The wealthier class was the first to compose this initial phalanx, as they could afford heavier and better quality armaments. However, when Rome began to war against adversaries such as the Samnites and the Gauls, it became evident that strategy and organization required urgent reformulation. The process of evolution culminated in the military reforms of Marcus Furius Camillus in the 4th century BC, who sought greater adaptability on the battlefield. This was when the idea of separating soldiers by lines, taking into account experience and age, began to take shape, paving the way for the emergence of the Triarii. During this period, the notion that trained veterans could serve as a strategic reserve became vital. The cost of losing experienced soldiers was high, so Rome increasingly valued preserving this combat nucleus, which would only be activated in desperate situations. As time passed, these formations evolved, departing from the direct influence of the phalanx and incorporating more fluid elements of combat. It was important to maintain strict discipline while also allowing greater mobility to address the complexities of battles. The prestige of the Triarii expanded as legends of their feats spread. Ancient historians attributed to them an almost sacred role within military hierarchy. After all, when they arrived to fight, it signaled that the clash had reached its peak and the decision of fate was on the line. Their combat methods and final position in the Roman formation crystallized into a three-line model that became increasingly sophisticated, creating the foundation of the classic Republican army. This evolution culminated in a point where the organization of lines clearly indicated who the inexperienced soldiers were and who truly sustained victory. From Camillus's reforms onward, the Roman legion became structured in three well-defined lines based on the combatant's experience rather than wealth. The first line, the hastati, consisted of young, inexperienced fighters eager for glory, but often charging into battle with reckless impulse. In the second line, the principes stood out as they had some battle experience, using more robust equipment, and capable of holding the front longer. They were the immediate support that often defined the initial dynamics of the confrontation, implementing well-rehearsed tactics. The Triarii in the third line emerged as the final foundation. Their discipline and calmness under pressure made them a true anchor in the storm of battle. While the first two groups fought, the Triarii waited calculatedly, ready to take the lead when everything seemed lost. This distribution reflected the new mentality of Rome. The army began to be valued for the ability of each age group, ensuring that the legion maintained a solid structure in any situation. It was no longer an army of isolated aristocrats or plebeians, but a cohesive force united by the duty to protect the Republic. For modern historians, this three-line model is seen as a significant leap in the art of warfare, as it combined the impetuosity of the young with the mature experience of veterans. Rome gradually became a war machine whose efficiency was not merely the result of armaments, but of meticulous tactical organization. Even without immediately entering action, the Triarii exerted great psychological pressure on the enemy, who knew that a robust layer of defense still lay ahead. In many situations, this was enough to deter bolder attacks, saving lives and maintaining the combat rhythm under control. This solid and diverse organization showcased to the world Rome's evolution in the military field. To understand even further the importance of the Triarii within this system, it is essential to closely examine what made their equipment and armament so lethal and respected. The primary weapon of the Triarii was the spear, a long lance about 2 meters long that ensured an advantage in reach and contributed to controlling tactical space. This equipment allowed them to pierce enemy defenses even before the foes could come close for hand-to-hand combat. When the distance reduced, the gladius came into play. This short yet versatile sword proved deadly in close combat. Forged for precise piercing, the gladius complemented the long spear, making the Triarii dangerous in any situation that necessitated a shift from defensive to offensive posture. The shield, initially round the clypeus, was heavy and provided extensive coverage. Over time, the legions adopted the rectangular scutum, more efficient in forming protective walls. The Triarii maintained the tradition of customizing their shields with emblems representing their family lineage and past achievements. As for body protection, they wore ornate bronze helmets, often adorned with plumes that signaled status and experience. Their armor could range from iron mail, lorica hamata, to metal breastplates balancing mobility with security. Everything was designed to withstand impacts and maintain the soldier's integrity during prolonged combat. The aesthetic of the equipment evoked respect and fear in adversaries. It wasn't merely a matter of beauty. Each detail symbolized the resolve and bravery of those who had faced countless battlefields. Seeing a Triarius in full armor meant confronting the very personification of Roman power. The rigorous maintenance of this arsenal was fundamental. The Triarii learned early on to care for their blades, polish the bronze and adjust straps and belts. This dedication demonstrated that it was not merely about having the best weapon, but about honoring it with due care, ensuring its full functionality at the decisive moment. Before this array of equipment, one perceives the essence of its tactical superiority. However, having good weapons was not enough. It was the way the Triarii utilized them and the discipline with which they organized their actions in battle. That truly made the difference, leading them to remarkable triumphs. The Triarii were not mere spectators. They entered the scene at critical moments when the first two lines had already engaged in their initial combats. This strategy imposed a devastating psychological pressure on the enemy, who realized that an intact elite force was still ready to act decisively. As they advanced, the Triarii moved with exemplary discipline. Cohesion was crucial. Each warrior protected the flank of their companion, creating an almost insurmountable wall. Collective experience helped identify weaknesses in the opposing forces, exploiting them without hesitation. In certain situations, Roman commanders opted for a more aggressive posture, using the Triarii to flank the enemy and attack with full force. This maneuver required precise calculation of time and space, as it mobilized highly skilled soldiers whose strategic value needed to be preserved. Nevertheless, the fundamental role of the Triarii remained one of support and insurance against defeat. Their reputation as the last resort was sufficient to quell panic within the Roman army, offering the commander the chance to reorganize the lines or retreat in an orderly fashion if the danger was insurmountable. The discipline of the Triarii allowed them to withstand mental trials amid chaos. The fluttering enemy standards, the noise of swords against shields, and the smell of sweat mingled with dust did not shake their concentration. For them, every step was meticulously controlled. This resilient posture also translated to flexibility. Even though they entered the fight late, they managed to adapt to the prevailing situation, advancing decisively if there was an opening or falling back to protect the more vulnerable units if necessary. Such adaptability was what kept Rome steady on many battlefronts. Above all, the image of the Triarius inspired confidence. Their mere presence could revitalize exhausted soldiers and create an aura of invincibility over the Roman troops. It was precisely this posture that shone in historic confrontations, where their performance became legend and etched in the records of posterity. In the Battle of the Great Plains, the renowned Scipio Africanus tested the limits of the Triarii, using them surprisingly to flank and disorient the Carthaginian army. While the enemy soldiers concentrated their forces on the Hastati and Principes, the arrival of the Triarii from the side caused chaos and a rapid dismantling of the opposing defenses. This utilization of veterans broke the traditional pattern of using them only as a last resort. Scipio realized that the experience and cohesive formation of the Triarii could enhance the offensive, showcasing a versatility that would leave deep marks on Roman military art. Even more iconic was their role in the Battle of Zama in 202 BC, the decisive confrontation against the legendary Hannibal. There, Scipio organized his formations to neutralize the Carthaginian elephants and subsequently positioned the Triarii centrally to absorb and repel the enemy's final blow. The brilliant performance at Zama solidified the reputation of the Triarii as the unbreakable core of the Roman army. Even in the face of creatures that terrified less experienced soldiers, the veterans stood firm, leveraging all the knowledge from their past experiences to remain unshaken. In the post-battle, stories emerged of Triarii who stood firm even when surrounded by numerous enemies. Some chroniclers spoke of soldiers who remained standing until their last breath, ensuring their comrades had time to reorganize the ranks. These accounts reinforced the mystique surrounding this elite group. The success in such significant confrontations transformed the Triarii into a synonym of determination. Various cities conquered by Rome knew that if it came time for the Triarii to fight, Roman victory was practically inevitable. However, this fame made them a priority target in certain future battles, for weakening the veterans meant shaking the entire army. After all, it was common for enemy generals to instruct their troops to focus on the older soldiers in a desperate attempt to break the pillar of Roman confidence. Nevertheless, the mental fortitude of the Triarii almost always overcame such attacks, making them even more feared and admired. This decisive participation in legendary battles led to the peak of the Triari's reputation. But no military hegemony lasts forever, and Rome experienced transformations that would shake the foundations of the army, dictating the end of this class of veteran soldiers. From the end of the 2nd century BC, Rome saw its political and military landscape become complicated. Wars against Germanic tribes, rampant territorial expansion, and internal civil conflicts began to demand profound changes in how the army was structured and maintained. It was in this context that the reforms of Gaius Marius emerged in 107 BC, which radically broke with the old divisions of hastati, principes, and triarii. He introduced legions made up of professional soldiers, recruited broadly, and no longer just from the classes that could afford their own equipment. With the standardization of armament and the soldiers' exclusive dedication to military life, the function of the Triarii as a separate elite force became obsolete. After all, the idea of a special reserve that only entered the fray as a last resort no longer made much sense in an army that trained everyone for various roles. The decline was also accelerated by the fact that in prolonged wars, maintaining different categories required complex logistics, not to mention preparation time. Marius preferred to simplify this process, facilitating the resupply and replacement of men, thus building a more agile and standardized force. Many veterans who would have become Triarii in other times ended up incorporated into units that mixed. Recruits and experienced soldiers valuing the exchange of knowledge in their day-to-day. This diluted the concept of a third line, gradually extinguishing the mythical figure of the Triarius. On the other hand, the absence of such an evident veteran class also raised questions about the loss of that unshakable spirit that the Triarii embodied. Some currents of thought lamented the symbolic disappearance of the last refuge, fearing that this would harm the tradition of honor. These fears, however, did not hinder the consolidation of the reforms. The professionalization of the Roman army had a profound impact on the future formation of the empire, and although the Triarii ceased to exist as a category, their legacy continued to inspire later generations who saw them as an example of unconditional bravery. The memory of the Triarii remains alive as a symbol of final resistance, a reminder that when everything seemed lost, there was still a flame burning in the veterans willing to fall for Rome. This legacy was not limited to the battlefields, but influenced the culture and the way military organization developed later. Many training manuals and strategies adopted, in their subtext, lessons that the Triarii left, the importance of keeping reserves, the wisdom in choosing the exact moment to advance, and the need to cultivate experience within the ranks of the army without wasting the potential of veteran soldiers. In military history, there are plenty of examples of armies that tried to create similar elite units, dedicated to turning the tide when the situation became extreme. The cohorts, auxiliary units, and other later Roman formations held an echo of what the Triarii represented. Understanding the trajectory of the Triarii is also understanding the evolution of the Roman Republic itself, which built its foundations thanks to discipline, courage, and the ability to adapt to new challenges. All this strength was for a long time concentrated in these veterans, who embodied the essence of the army. The symbols and emblems they carried on their shields still inspire historians and enthusiasts of antiquity as they reveal the intimate connection between the soldier and their lineage, between family tradition and loyalty to the homeland. In each painting or ornament, there was a story of honor that left marks on collective memory. Even in language, the term "to reach the Triarii" has traversed the centuries, metaphorically used to describe occasions when one reaches the maximum limit of perseverance, or when one requires the ultimate reserve of strength. The expression has become a living testament to how these ancient legions still resonate in our daily lives. Far beyond a mere military category, the Triarii symbolize the pinnacle of human commitment in the face of adversity. It is inevitable to reflect on how this heritage has traversed time, upholding values that extend beyond the borders of Rome and reaching our current perspective on discipline and honor. It is remarkable to realize how a group of veteran warriors, positioned in the rear of the legions, can carry on their shoulders the fate of an entire republic. The image of the Triarii shows us that victory is not always won at the front lines. Sometimes it is achieved in the patience of those who wait for the right moment to act. Thinking about this history invites reflection on the importance of having reserves of strength, whether in ancient armies or in our personal battles. Like the Triarii, each of us can discover a source of unwavering courage that only manifests when everything seems lost.